As a child, I never liked staying in my grandmother's house. It was big, creepy, and creaky. When I was younger, I would complain about going over there. My mother would say things like, "There's nothing wrong with the house," and it's just my imagination playing tricks on me because the house had character. To this day, I've never understood what that meant, and even though I couldn't prove that there was anything there, I still felt like I was always being watched. My father, however, he had heard enough of my complaints and protested against me being forced to go over there ever again. Fast forward to my late teenage years, I had to be about 17 years old, and I insisted on having my freedom. So when my mother approached me about watching my grandmother's house while she left town for a funeral, I said no problem. I jumped at any chance to be on my own, casting my childhood fears of the place out of my mind. My first night there, everything seemed normal. There were no signs of the creepy things that bothered me in the past. The house was quiet, and I felt kind of cozy as I curled up on the couch to watch television. I must have been really tired because I ended up drifting off to sleep in the middle of the program that I was watching. Around 10 p.m., I heard a bang that made me jump out of my sleep. I was startled, so I jumped up looking around trying to see if I could see anyone. I even called out hello to see if anyone would respond. Maybe my grandmother had decided to come back home instead of going to the funeral. When I didn't get an answer or see any physical signs of anyone else in the house with me, I thought maybe the sound was in my dream. Just to be sure, I paused. I was standing there listening to see if I was going to hear the sound again. I listened for more than a few seconds before I concluded that I had heard the sound in my dream. But then it happened again, and this time I was wide awake. Bang, bang! Louder this time. It sounded like someone had dropped something heavy multiple times on the attic floor. My heart started beating faster than the first time I heard the noise. I told myself maybe it was the loose window somewhere, because if someone had broken in, I would have heard that. Then the memories of my childhood at my grandmother's house started to slowly reappear. I was becoming afraid. Thinking that I could drown out the banging, I went back to where the TV was and turned the volume up. But it didn't stop. I began to hear footsteps, slow and dragging, coming from the attic. They moved across the floor above, like heavy boots shuffling through dust. Trying to calm down, I turned the TV off and went to the kitchen for a snack. That's when I heard it. The TV clicked back on. I peeked around the corner and then stood frozen as the screen flickered to life, showing only static. Then it clicked off. Then on again. By itself. I ran and grabbed the remote, trying to turn it off, but it seemed to have a mind of its own. A chill ran through me, and my fight or flight instinct started to activate. I didn't have to trick myself into believing that it was all just a dream, or that the house was settling, or that there was an old window somewhere banging. These things were happening, and I needed to get out of the house immediately. I didn't want to come back in the house for any reason, so I decided that while the noises were contained to the attic, that I needed to grab my belongings and get gone. And that's when I heard it. A new sound. Whistling. It carried through the hallway, soft and old-timey, like someone working on a windy day. My legs moved before I could think, running up the steps, taking me to my grandmother's room where her old rocking chair sat by the window. There it was, slowly rocking back and forth, piled high with grandmother's clothes. I watched, my eyes wide with disbelief. There were no drives. There were no open windows. Just the chair moving under invisible hands. I had never heard the scream that I let out of my mouth. I didn't think that I was capable of making a sound like that. Fear had hit me like a wave. I dashed out of the room, my feet pounding down the stairs, but there it was again, the unmistakable sound of heavy steps, down the stairs behind me, as if something was chasing me. All the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I kept dipping my back forward trying to avoid being grabbed. I bolted for the front door, leaving behind all of my belongings. I didn't even have on shoes. The night cold hit me as I ran, the fear pushing me down the dim lit street. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I ran until I couldn't breathe. As I tried to catch my breath, I could still hear the whistling in my ear. That's when I realized I had run far enough. I took off again. Realizing I couldn't run all night, I found a safe looking house and knocked on a door that belonged to an older couple. They were startled by my presence, but nice to me and let me in to call my parents. After I told them who I was and what had happened to me at my grandmother's house, they tried to convince me that it was just an old house making sounds. But each time I think back, I can still feel the presence of whatever it was chasing me down those stairs. The feeling is heavy. My grandmother is much older now, and believe it or not, she still lives in that house. I have not been back to my grandmother's house since. Just because she made peace with the fact that she has ghosts doesn't mean that I have to. It was the summer before my senior year when my grandmother took ill. My mother and father both had demanding jobs and couldn't take off very long to tend to her. So they decided to send me. When I complained that this wasn't how I wanted to spend my summer, I was reminded of how every time I was sick, no matter how minor or severe, my grandmother would make it her business to come and see about me. Feeling guilty, I agreed. My mother had the task of making sure I made it to my grandmother's house. I remember us leaving out first thing in the morning to make the long 12-hour drive. My mother didn't mind the drive. She actually welcomed it. She hadn't been back to her childhood home since she had left it many years ago. By the time we made it to grandmother's house, it was dark and stormy out. The storm had come out of nowhere, and I was sure that my mother was going to stay at grandmother's house with me. But instead, she came inside, talked to and checked on grandmother, made sure I was somewhat settled in, kissed us both goodbye, and left. I found it kind of strange that she didn't want to stay, but I didn't push the issue. After putting my things away, I went to go check on my grandmother, who was in bed and doped up off of meds. She drifted in and out of sleep as I talked to her. Knowing that she needed her rest, I decided to leave her alone and make myself familiar with her house. Looking at old pictures of my mother, aunts, and uncles on the wall, I realized that I didn't have a single memory of ever being in my grandmother's house. Her space was so antique but very new to me. I was fascinated at how she lived. After roaming every inch of the house, I decided that I needed to settle in for the night and get some rest, just in case I needed to get up early with my grandmother. The storm had picked up outside, and thunder boomed like nature's wrath had come to my grandmother's old house. The room that had been picked for me had a weird smell and a creepiness hung thick in the air. I curled up in the bed with the blanket that was already there. I pulled it tightly around me, trying to fight the draft that had crept in. The wind howled outside, and the rain lashed against the windows, each drop sounding like soft, persistent tapping as though someone or something wanted in. I began to feel fear lying in the bed. Out of nowhere, I began to feel like there was someone standing over me. Though there wasn't anyone there, I just didn't feel alone. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and began scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the growing uneasiness that I was feeling. That's when I heard faint whispering, like several people carrying on a conversation just out of earshot. I thought maybe grandmother had company, which was strange because she could barely keep her eyes open when I was speaking to her. When did she get the strength to even open the door? I didn't realize that the doorbell had even rang. I got up and peeked out from around the bedroom door, glancing down the hallway. Suddenly, there she was, grandmother. I could have sworn I heard other voices, but she was standing there alone. As I went back and climbed in the bed, I caught sight of her gliding past the doorway, her eyes fixed straight ahead, wearing the same old cardigan I seen her wearing hundreds of times. I was confused because grandmother had on pajamas in her bed a while ago. I blinked and she was gone. Grandmother? I called out, a knot forming in my stomach. There was no answer, just the rain's relentless tapping, now more intensely. With trembling legs, I headed out of the bedroom in the direction that I saw grandmother go. There was another room down the hall. I was hoping to catch up to her and get a rational explanation as to why she was up and whom she was just talking to. Lightning flickered outside, and it seemed to turn the pictures in the hallways into ghostly timelines. As I stood in the doorway trying to figure out where grandmother had went, that's when I saw the closet door in the spare room slowly creak open. I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. There was a huge shadow figure rippling towards me. I backed away, every instinct in me screaming run. I ran back to the bedroom that I was staying in. I grabbed my phone and reverted back to a child and jumped in the bed, pulling the blanket over me, as if the thin material could shield me from whatever the dark shadow was. I dialed my mother frantically. She didn't answer. I dialed my father. He wasn't answering. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That's when lightning struck, bright and blinding, even through the blanket I had over my head. I remember the blanket being pulled off of me, and a figure appeared at the foot of the bed. It was tall, dark, blocking the flashes of light from the window behind it. My heart thumped painfully as the figure glided towards me. Panic exploded in me like a dam breaking. Without thinking, I dove out of the bed and dashed down the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps. I ran next door to a neighbor's house and huddled on the porch, calling my parents back to back. My mother was the first one to call me back. I told her what I had witnessed at grandmother's house. She told me that she was on her way to get me. It was just my luck that she was at a hotel not far from grandmother's house. When my mother arrived, we sat in her car for a bit. That's when she told me about her haunting childhood and why she hadn't returned after all these years. She told me that she wouldn't force me to stay, but we couldn't leave grandmother there alone, so we would have to take her with us. I didn't care. When we went to tell grandmother what the new plan was, that's when we discovered that grandmother had passed away in her sleep.